Hello and welcome to the Underhand Free Throws 2022-2023 season NBA predictions. We've never done a prediction show before this season, obviously, so how we structured this one is we get into our predictions and we'll have those later on in the week for the Eastern Conference. But before that, we're going to talk about a couple of the teams that were just really confusing or hard for us to rank in the standings for whatever reason. If you're impatient and you want to hear the predictions sooner, we're going to have those uploaded in our podcast form, and the links to our podcast on Spotify and iTunes are in the description of this video. So with that, let's get into some of the teams that were really hard for us to rank this season. The third team that we had a hard time deciding what to do with this season is the Atlanta Hawks. The one other team that I think you and me have both really struggled to know what to do with in the Eastern Conference, along with the Raptors and the Cavaliers, has to be the Atlanta Hawks. It's another one of these teams that has a really high ceiling. I won't say their floor is the basement, but as we saw last year with how poor their defense was most of the year, their floor is certainly low, even given how effective they are at scoring the ball. And, the Hawks have, unlike the Raptors, have a very effective half-court offense, but they just really struggled to stop other teams last year. And so they finished the year out number 8 in the standings.
And they finished the year as the second ranked offense in the NBA and the 26th ranked defense. So definitely, unlike the Raptors, who are kind of average to above average on both sides of the ball, this is a much more extreme team, the Atlanta Hawks. In terms of additions they've made, obviously they pulled off a significant trade of their own, bringing in Dejounte Murray, formerly of the San Antonio Spurs. I know you're a huge Dejounte Murray fan. How do you see him changing the fortunes of the Hawks? Just quick note, because we mentioned 538's forecast. They are really high on the Hawks. Some people have the Hawks in borderline the playoffs, but there's some data that thinks the Hawks are going to soar this year.
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking about the Hawks is both of us struggle to know exactly what to do with them, but I certainly could see great things for the Hawks. I'm tempering my expectations a little bit just because I want to see it happen first before going too all in, and just because I think there's some other teams that are more established and can maybe be trusted a little bit more in the regular season. I know coaching is one question that I have with the Hawks, but one thing I will say is their defense was obviously their biggest failing last year, and I think a lot of that got addressed. Obviously, adding Dejounte Murray is huge as having a really great point of attack defender. He's a guard technically, but he is 6'5" and has kind of a freaky wingspan, and is also just a crazy, fluid athlete who can stay in front of players very easily and can get those long arms up there and contest shots, even over, with much bigger guys that he's defending. So I think that's going to be huge for them, because they really just didn't have an elite defensive guard last year.
They're making DeAndre Hunter, whenever he was healthy, guard, point guards and stuff like that. And I just felt you have one position of defense. They had two positions of defensive strength. It was center and small forward. But when they would take their small forward and make him chase around point guards, they just sort of opened up a different hole, where they're just very vulnerable to the wing.
Then you're putting Bogdan Bogdanovic trying to guard larger wings, and things can kind of cascade from there. And then obviously you're hiding Trey on the other team's weakest offensive player. And I don't think that's going to change. But outside of adding Dejounte Murray, I see two other areas of defensive improvement. And those are a healthier DeAndre Hunter. He missed roughly half the year last year. And then more minutes from Onyeka Okongwu, I think, is going to really help seal up the interior. I don't know how much Okongwu and Clint Capella are going to share the floor together as two non-shooting bigs, but Okongwu certainly has the foot speed and athleticism to stay in front of bigger forwards. So I don't see it as being a bad defensive fit. But it's going to be a shame if Capella is still playing in the high 20s minutes per night and Okongwu doesn't get a chance to shine, because I think his defensive upside is huge.
It's an interesting thing, because Capella's not old yet. He's older than the other Hawks. So it's we've been projecting the Hawks' future for so long that it's we know Clint Capella is not going to be good or on the team when Trae Young is 26 or something like that, or 27. But Clint Capella is still very good. He's more offensively capable than Onyeka is at this point in terms of like being a lob threat for Trae Young.
Yeah.
You definitely want, if you've got a passer like Trae Young, you have to have a lob threat on the floor. You're otherwise you're just wasting this whole specific realm of offense of like easy passes for efficient buckets. And so Clint is really still important there. But everyone's ready for the Onyeka Okongwu era. It would be nice if they could play together a little bit, even if there was just like a 5 minute a night lineup that was like defensively geared, but we didn't really see that at all from them last year. So I see no reason to predict that this year. But looking at their overall rotation, there's some defensive upside from last year. Like, because I think all they're really hoping is to move from like the 26th defense into being like, 15th or something. That's if you're like the number one offense in the NBA and an average defense, that's a title contender. So I think the Hawks would be thrilled with that. They will no longer be playing Danilo Gallinari big minutes at the 4 and the 5. And that's a total offensive move with like obvious defensive ramifications. So, I mean, Onyeka's got minutes to pick up there. You're swapping at essentially like a monster defensive piece for an offensive boosting piece. Dejounte Murray, who we've discussed, is going to be taking specifically minutes that were occupied last year by Kevin Huerter. So that's a big defensive upgrade. Bogdanovich.
I imagine that Dejounte Murray will play the backup point a decent amount.
Yeah.
As providing they stagger him and Trae Young's minutes, which they definitely should, because Dejounte Murray is most valuable with the ball in his hands.
Yeah. And also the guy who he's replacing in that part of his rotation minutes is Lou Williams, who's just one, like, I was a little bit like frustrated watching the Hawks last year. I rooted for them pretty hard the year before when they ended up going to the Eastern Conference Finals. I was super high on them. So to see them go into this year, and I've seen this happen so many times in the NBA, a team is like, they're super successful. They catch lightning in a bottle off of their offense. And then the next year, but their defense is like, eh. And the next year they double down and just go like, okay, let's just try to get even better on offense and just throw it all away on defense. Like we saw the Lakers do that after their title season. Another big team for me was the 2003 Mavericks with Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki. Went to the Western Conference Finals, were a dominant offensive team that had a lot of defensive role players on it. And that was the year they got rid of all their defensive role players to bring in Antoine Walker and Anton Jameson. And their offense did get even more ridiculous, but their defense went from average to last in the league, and they just weren't a serious contender anymore. It's like, it's such a classic mistake in roster building. It's like, yes, you're an offensive team. It's about getting your defense as sort of like close to average or making it as good as you can. And so I do think in terms of personnel, the Hawks have boosted their defense a little bit, because you can't just go out there like, yeah, we're going to play Trae Young and Lou Williams in crunch time with Bogdanovich at the 4. And heck, let's throw Danilo Gallinari out there at the 5. It's just like, we need to make shots. It's like you're giving up a bucket guaranteed every single time with lineups like that. And I remember found myself pretty frustrated with Nate McMillan in that regard, and that he just made these all big time offense for defense sacrifices all the time that like we're not serving them well. So I think they're not going to be a great defensive team, but I feel that they've boosted their defense. They've tilted their roster in the right direction, I think, without really a big defensive sacrifice. It's not like, offensive sacrifice. It's like Dejounte Murray is an upgrade over Kevin Huerter, maybe not in terms of like as a shooter, but overall, like, you've upped your offensive talent.
Yeah, the only question I have about the Hawks is just, what is their depth like at forward? DeAndre Hunter has already shown injury concerns. He's really struggled to stay healthy in his career. Yeah, I mean, who do they have after him and John Collins? I mean, they drafted AJ Griffin in the draft this year. It would be nice to see anything resembling competent NBA play out of Jalen Johnson. And I guess they have Justin Holiday, who is around. They have a couple holidays on the roster with him and his younger brother Aaron. So maybe he'll be the missing guy at the one of the backup forward spots.
Yeah, but Bogdanovich is going to play some 3. He's kind of all over the place. They just sort of throw him out there. Jalen Johnson, no idea what to expect out of that. He was he dropped out of he dropped out of college to prepare for the draft. He was like a player with really interesting skills and athleticism and some big holes in his game. We have no idea whether he's going to be in the rotation this year or whether he's going to be a thing or not. AJ Griffin's going to be a stick shooter. I have no doubt about that, but his defense was putrid at Duke.
So, yeah.
I
that's also
I didn't like that
Duke
pick at all.
thing.
Yeah. He was injured. He's had injury problems a lot already, but his mobility, just moving side to side, he looked just so sapped. Now, if there's a possibility that was because his injuries were recent and he's got another level physically, that could be actually a huge steal for them. But when they drafted like a 6 shooter who can't play defense at all, I was like, Hawks, that's not what you need to be doing right now. It's
the opposite of what they should be doing. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Especially because they really need depth at those larger wing positions. So
yeah. But yeah, the Hawks are another team. Like, again, be the number 1 offense, be the number 14 defense. Like, sure, finish first or second in the East. Or if your defense is still miserable, have fun getting out of the play-in again. But super interesting team. It's crazy that the Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 seasons ago. The Raptors won the championship in 2019, and they've both taken these step backs but still have this big plans for the future. It's interesting to see them come up.